Shalom and welcome back to Reboot the Root, where we are continuing to look at the Hebrew language. Okay, so maybe you've always wanted to learn how to read Hebrew. Well, I pride myself on this channel of appealing to people who are new, people who are beginners, as people who have desired to be in the Hebrew roots type of faith. And so if that's you, you are at the beginning stages, or maybe you're a person that's been in the walk for a while and you've never bothered to invest your time into learning the Hebrew language. This place is for you, because we're going to go really slow and we're not going to go fast, and I'm hoping that you will be blessed as I've been blessed of learning how to read Hebrew and to know what it means, and it will deepen your understanding of scriptures. I promise you that it will. It has for me. So anyway, thank you for coming back here to this series called Excuse My Hebrew, and we're in episode 3. And before we go on, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Hit that subscribe button. You'll get the notification for the next video in the series, plus the other series that will be coming out in the not so distant future, okay? And if you've liked this video, please hit that like button and consider sharing this video with others. It would be awesome to me if you could share this video with others. And if you ever want to get a hold of me personally, send me an email to reboottherootjourney@gmail.com. Okay, so let's move on. But first, as we usually do, let us go into a short review, shall we? So in episode 1 and 2, we're going through some Hebrew 101. We're trying to get rid of some basic things that I feel you need to know before we start learning the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Okay, so we want to cover some basics of the Hebrew language. And last episode, I left you that we were talking about the different forms of ancient Hebrew, which would be pictograph Hebrew and Paleo Hebrew. And pictograph Hebrew is represented by pictures, just as the name suggests. Pictograph Hebrew is represented by pictures. There are pictures that represent each letter, and we put letters together or pictures together to put together words. And when we know what the modern Hebrew letters mean pictorially, then we can understand better what a word means. Like, for an example, last episode I used the example of putting Aleph and Bet together, and we learned that Aleph means head and Bet means house, and we learned by putting those two together it means the head of the house. And who's the head of the house? It's Yahweh. He is the Father. Okay? And so, and then we also talked about that out from pictorial Hebrew, there came an evolution of the Hebrew language through Paleo Hebrew. And Paleo Hebrew started to take on a look that looked more like letters rather than pictures, okay? And it's kind of like the link between pictorial Hebrew and modern Hebrew, okay? And so that's where we were at last episode. And so now we're going to quickly move on with more Hebrew 101. So let's start going. So like we left off last episode, we talked about that pictographs predated Paleo Hebrew, okay? And then Paleo Hebrew predates modern Hebrew. And modern Hebrew goes by some other names. Obviously, one of them is modern Hebrew. There's block letter Hebrew, and it's also called Babylonian or an Assyrian form of Hebrew that contains 22 letters. Now, it can be 27 letters if we were to include the 5 Hebrew letters that have final forms. And final forms are the form of 5 of the Hebrew letters that exist at the end of a word. Okay, and we'll go into that much later. Okay, so modern Hebrew that we know today evolved from Paleo Hebrew around 500 BC, okay, during the Babylonian captivity. And so before Babylonian type of Hebrew language, we had the Paleo-Hebrew. And then before Paleo-Hebrew, we had pictograph Hebrew, okay? And so this form of Babylonian type of Hebrew block letter language came about around the 6th century, okay? And this would be around the Babylonian captivity, okay? And so when we look at this word in Hebrew that's called Katav Ivri, this means Hebrew script. And so Katav is Hebrew for script, and Ivri is actually the real word for Hebrew, okay? It's Ivri, all right, is Hebrew, which means Katav Ivri means Hebrew script. Scholars call it Paleo-Hebrew or Proto-Hebrew, and is quite similar to the ancient Phoenician writing, and I'm really referring to Paleo-Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew was very similar to Phoenician language, Phoenician writing, and Paleo-Hebrew existed until about 500 BC, or somewhere around there, whenever they went into the Babylonian captivity. Actually, if we want to get precise about it, the Babylonian captivity was 587 BC. Okay? Continue on with Hebrew 101. So when we're looking at the Hebrew language, there are Hebrew words that are gender-based, okay? So Hebrew language is gender-based, hence the masculine and feminine form of many of the words. So we need to put this in examples like Shavuot. Many of you have heard that means weeks, okay? Or you've heard of Elohim, okay? So those are both forms of plural words, okay? But they have different endings, okay? So like Elohim, that means gods. It's plural, okay? That has an "im" on the end, and that makes it a male plural form of a word. On the other hand, like when we look at Shavuot is plural for week. So Shavua is singular, with Shavuot is plural. So we added an OT on the end of Shavua, which makes it plural, and that's the female form of it. So there are other words that have OTs or IMs on it, and we'll probably run into them later in this series. But it's good to know that you have, when you have plural forms of Hebrew words, they in an IM or an OT, im and ot, okay? And I've already gone over this a little bit, but Hebrew is read from right to left, and we'll probably keep emphasizing that because it's important, because that's what really distinguishes the difference between Hebrew and English, is how you read it. And it takes a little while to get to the practice of that. So things are going to look really weird when you try to read from right to left, because you're not used to looking at it like that way. So Hebrew is read from right to left, and it has it's a type of alphabet system that's called an abjad system of alphabet. And that's where an alphabet that doesn't use any vowels, they only have consonants in them, okay? So it's an abjad alphabet system. And so we will talk later about how do we deal with these things, okay? That a language that doesn't have vowels but just has consonants. It's not that Hebrew doesn't have any vowels in it, but you have to add them to know how to read Hebrew. Hebrew in its basic form, when it's written, doesn't come with vowel points. Those are used for people who are learning how to pronounce a word, how to read a word. You wouldn't see this in a Torah scroll, okay? You wouldn't see that, okay? But it's used for practicing learning how to read Hebrew. With that said, some of these letters can function as vowels. Let me repeat that. Some of the consonants, the consonant Hebrew letters, those that aren't vowels, those that don't have vowel points. Let me rephrase that. There are some Hebrew letters that can act as a vowel, and one of those letters would be the vav or the wav. Okay, and so the vav is the 6th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and when you use it in a word, it can act as a vowel given an oo or o sound. Okay, so that said, some of the letters in the Hebrew language can function or act as vowels. A system of points, dashes, and lines are called nikud, and that was developed to label consonants that are serving as vowels. So these nikud are going to look like lines, and a series of lines, a series of dots and dashes under letters to act as vowel points. Okay, so they're commonly known as vowel points that tell us how to read letters. Okay, I-eem and ot, they are the plural forms of words denoting and dictating whether they are a female or a masculine form of word. Hebrew is read from right to left and has an alphabet of 22 letters. This alphabet of the Hebrew alphabet is a system called abjad, a system where only consonants are represented. And that said, some of these letters can function as vowels. A system of points, dashes, and lines called nikud was developed to label consonants that are serving as vowels. Okay, so all of this will become clear to you, very clear to you later about using plural form of words in Hebrew and how to deal with a language that only has consonants, because we're going to have vowel points until you learn how to pronounce and how to read Hebrew words. Okay? Moving on with Hebrew 101, Hebrew is not always translated well to English. So it would be a simple thing to say, okay, let's take a Hebrew word and translate it to English. Well, that doesn't always work well, probably for the reason because English is not a sovereign language. It means it wasn't developed all on its own. English is a mutt language that is comprised of other languages, okay? But anyway, Hebrew doesn't always translate well to English, as you will discover when you try to find transliteration of English words to Hebrew. And as I've stated before, English is always read from left to right, okay? You're going to the left when you're reading, so you're going to put your first Hebrew letter on the right, and then you go towards the left, okay? And we have an example like that here on the screen. So we have this Hebrew phrase that says, Hayab Mash Taim, okay? So when you write it, it's written and read from right to left, but when we're writing it, when we have it on the screen like this, it's actually put on the screen backwards, okay? So it says Hayama Mish Taim. We're writing it and actually reading it from left to right because we're English speakers, okay? But we want to pronounce it going from right to left. So we would say Haya Mamish Taim, okay? And by the way, that's Hebrew. That means it was really good. So if you ever go to Israel, you can comment on the food by saying Haya Mamish Taim, okay? And the one thing we need to recognize is that English is more noun-based, where Hebrew is more action-based. It's more verb-oriented. There's always an action in Hebrew words. When we look at like people's names in Hebrew, they usually are names that describe who they are, okay? So when we have an English name, our English name doesn't describe who we are. But if you have a name like Abraham, Abraham means father of many nations, because that's what he does, all right? And you look at an even better example. Yeshua means Yahweh is salvation, okay? So it describes what he does, all right? But if we want to go back really and see what all these Bible characters' names mean, we have to see how the operation of early Hebrew worked in pictographs. Like I said before, the words or the letters we put together, they are all represented by a picture, okay? And we put the pictures together, we find out what the words mean, okay? And that works in pictograph, Paleo, or modern Hebrew. Well, I thought that was pretty interesting. I want to leave you with this last thing. It comes from the Wikipedia article, History of the Hebrew Alphabet. It says, Paleo Hebrew alphabet is the modern term coined by Solomon Birnbaum in 1954. It's used for the script otherwise known as the Phoenician alphabet, and when used to write Hebrew or when found in the context of the ancient Israelite kingdoms. This script was used in the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, as well as throughout Canaan, and more generally during the 10th to 7th centuries BCE. By the 6th or 5th centuries, this script had diverged into numerous national variants, the most successful of these being the Aramaic script, which came to be widely adopted in the Persian Empire. And I read this as a closing to tell you how did the Paleo Hebrew alphabet work its way into modern Hebrew, okay? And we see about this evolution of how Paleo Hebrew that may be known in some conversations as a Phoenician alphabet, how it worked itself in to the annals of Israelite history in its language, okay? So it's interesting to know this. I'm giving you background histories of the language that we are studying. I can't give you, well, not that I can't, but I probably won't give you everything that's in the history of the Hebrew language, but just the pertinent things that I think that you need to know that will make your knowledge of the Hebrew language stronger, okay? Well, that's about all the time we have for episode 3 of Excuse My Hebrew. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I encourage you to come back next episode, episode 4, as we continue to look at the Hebrew language and some more factoids that I think you need for Hebrew that's good to know. And so it'll be exciting to see what we come up with in episode 4. Amen. Well, this is Reboot the Root signing off and saying shalom.